the right time to stand up for freedom? Could it be when you start to feel creating children who'll inherit the pain and the debt of this nation and be slaves to the banks that cause hyperinflation, who are masters of commerce, lies, and bad legislation? Whoa, if you looked in the eyes of 1,000 young children through fences of razors, their innocence stolen as the red flag of tyranny flies in the open, is that when you finally notice? Whoa, whoa, but I'm only a stranger here. I'm a long, long way from my home, and they say I can't change all the things I find strange, for what can one man do?
Welcome to the Liberty Test, a show about libertarian ideas and whether they can solve real problems in the real world. I'm your host, Dan Castello, and today we're going to tackle a story that's been making headlines and sparking intense debate across the country. Recently, the CEO of United Healthcare, Karyn Thompson, was shot and killed outside a Manhattan hotel. A suspect, Luigi Mangione, has been arrested and charged with first-degree murder. But what's been even more shocking is the reaction to this crime. Many people have taken to social media to express not just outrage or sorrow at a murder, but actually a sense of justification and even celebration of the suspect's actions. As we dig deeper into this story, we'll explore the apparent motivations behind the murder, the controversy surrounding the healthcare industry, and the broader implications for our society. We'll examine the flaws in our healthcare system, the struggles people face in accessing affordable care, and the potential for change in the wake of this tragedy. Joining me today are fellow libertarians who will help me unpack the complexities of this issue and shed light on the ideologies at work behind the headlines. So let's get started on this important conversation. There's a couple of directions we can take this tonight. First, there's the issue of whether the attack was some sort of justified self-defense. And second, there's the problem of how to provide health care in a fair manner in a society where not everyone can afford even the simplest care. I know we have some strong feelings on this, so before we get started, let's introduce ourselves. I have three libertarians joining me tonight. Bob, would you like to start us off and
Sure.
introduce
Bob
yourself?
Schuon, chair of the Suffolk County Libertarian Party, and we're here to talk about our platform and their libertarian view of things like this and how we can deal with it as a society.
Blay, how about you?
Blay Tarnoff. I'm currently the chair of the county committee of the Nassau County Libertarian Party. I'm a past state chair, past secretary for many, many, many years of the state party. Been a member of the Libertarian Party since 1990.
I've had lots of experience then applying libertarian values to complicated solutions. Rose, why don't you introduce yourself?
I am Rose Leatherman. I am the secretary of the Onondaga County Libertarian Party. I am a member of the New York Libertarian Party State Committee and a member of Platform and Communications Committees. I have been a libertarian from as early as I can remember, and I've been a big libertarian for about 5 years now, after I decided, I might as well get involved in the party because they need people to take it in the right direction.
Yeah, but the right direction can be hard to figure out. I mean, healthcare in particular is a complex issue, but then there's also, as an individual small person in a society that you control very little of, when you feel attacked or harmed by the system, how do you address your grievances, especially when you feel like the system is stacked against little guys, right? So maybe that's where we should start this evening. Does anybody have any strong feelings on whether the attack itself is some kind of uh, freedom fighter type activity or whether it's just a straight up murder?
Well,
I'll say, go ahead.
personally, I think the anger in this case is directed in the wrong direction. because yes, there may be some responsibility here for difficulties in the healthcare system with the healthcare insurance companies, but at the same time, there is the regulations. There's the all the overhead that comes with government involvement in every aspect of this. I remember when I was a kid, we would go to the family doctor. We'd just drive up, we'd get our little appointment, and we'd pay like $20, $25, and he would do everything. He would take blood. He would give any shots you needed. He would, do a full workup, and then great. See you next year. Have a great day. And there was no insurance involved. There was no nothing. It was just a regular thing. And you know, even if you got seriously ill, in most cases, it wasn't $500,000. I mean, I have more stories on that aspect of it, but so. But the other problem is that, especially as libertarians, using violence to settle your grievance, whatever it might be, it's not appropriate. That person was not attacking you. We use the NAP, the non-aggression principle, and that's really core to our point of view. Is you don't initiate violence against people. That's just bad. Unless they're attacking you with deadly force, why are you doing this?
So how much of an attack, though, constitutes,
Well, that's
right?
I do have a few words about this. I think I would say, there is a serious question: at which point can someone who is using the system to their advantage be said to be committing aggression against others? Like, for example, suppose you have the CEO of a private quote unquote defense company who they do not declare wars themselves, but they pour millions of dollars into funding the political campaigns of politicians who they know are going to lobby Congress to start new wars. They spend millions of dollars on corporate news media to try to get them to push a pro-war message. And they do everything in their power to lobby for a new war. And then they make most of their money selling weapons to Congress. I think most people would say that they have some amount of that they can be said to be playing a significant role in the murders that happen overseas. So the question here is if someone gets involved in a already heavily regulated industry, uses their position to lobby for more regulations, granting them an increasingly large share of the healthcare market, then uses, in the case of this particular CEO, an AI to automatically deny claims, knowing that fewer than 1% of the people whose claims get denied are even going to have the money or resources to try to pursue a legal resolution to this. And also knowing that they have the state backing them, can they be said to have committed aggression against the people who entered into a contractual agreement and sent them money on the understanding that they would be provided with health care, when these people then use their state privileged position to deny the product that the person paid for, knowing that these people are not free to just take their business elsewhere because the market can in no way be considered a free market. There are maybe 3 health insurance companies and
authorized by the state. See, that's part of the problem, is that the state does all of this, and with the state you have no recourse. I mean, it's unless you're going to replace the entire political leadership, the state pretty much owns the healthcare system at this point, which we'll get into whether that's actually fascism at another point, but it's still it's a state corporation mishmash, whatever you want to call it, crony capitalism, whatever.
That raises a good point, though, Bob. I mean, when you call it fascism, whether some people would say that's a bridge too far or not, let's say that we did live in some kind of obvious fascist system. Would an individual be justified in using force or deadly violence against someone who is maybe not in the driver's seat behind that system, but certainly close to the top of that pyramid and making decisions that hurt people, at least indirectly.
Well, in the libertarian view, okay, there are several preconditions before violence can be initiated by anyone. And going back to our New York State Libertarian platform, okay, the first thing is that yes, individuals have the right to defend themselves. Defense is a very wide subject. I don't know if we'll be able to touch on all the aspects of it, but there's we use a principle 3.2, which says immediate defensive action. Okay, it's not just enough for there to be aggression. You have to be threatened directly, and it has to be immediate, because otherwise, it they talk about anarchy, and anarchy doesn't mean what people think it means. Anarchy simply means without government, but you would want a situation that's chaotic. Okay, you don't get to just hurt people on your own whim. Okay, there are systems in place, because as civilized people, hurting each other should not ever be the norm. It should be something that is a last resort with no other. It's the last of the worst of the options is pretty much how I would describe it.
Well, I'm glad you bring up the platform because when we were working through coming up with the planks, we did put some thoughts in about how people ought to resolve conflicts. So, how should somebody who feels aggrieved, by their health insurance company deal with that? I mean, what if they have an arbitration clause in their contract or something? Is that fair according to our worldview?
Well, if you freely agree to it, and there's where the key is, freely, because if you're coerced into accepting it, then you didn't accept it. Basically, you were coerced because you had no other choice. However, in a free society, you would have the choice. If you want mediation, that's good. If you want arbitration, if you want to negotiate, or if there is no reasonable settlement that can be reached between the parties, you can go to a third party, which in case of arbitration is also the legal system. And this is where the problem is people have a false sense of like how these systems work because they've been corrupted by the government into these twisted and just not valid forms. I don't know how to better describe it.
I'm glad you brought up coercion because I think we all here would agree that, like, for example, if somebody put a gun to your head and forced you to sign a contract with a particular insurance company, we'd all agree that was an act of aggression. However, what if a particular company uses their resources to lobby the state to grant them either a monopoly or a quasi-monopoly on the health insurance industry? Then also, thanks to state regulations that exist, limiting the number of healthcare providers and imposing all sorts of red tape, and also through certificate of need laws, also literally barring new providers from cropping up and having price minimums
Exactly.
that also have inflated the cost of healthcare to an unaffordable level, so that you are so that so that most people, unless you happen to be a multimillionaire already, are in, like, they have basically two choices. They can either go without health insurance and just cross their fingers and hope that they never have a serious accident or get diagnosed with a serious illness, or they can sign a contract with one of the few providers that exists. So I guess what I'm saying here is, if a particular insurance corporation uses its position to lobby for regulations that make it so that someone is left with few options other than to sign a contract with them, have they actually signed freely, or is it coercion?
So we can see how people would feel coerced, whether that would meet a legal definition or not. We can see the desperation and what's stemming or what's causing that. I mean, we should maybe talk a little bit more about the specifics behind things like certificate of need and, the ways that government uses its power to actually create this coercion and who benefits from it. People like Brian Thompson, for example. But at the same time, we could also discuss the direction a libertarian administration in a state like New York would prefer to take things. I mean, for example, uh, just to play devil's advocate with this here, wouldn't somebody from the political left say, well, just create a single payer healthcare system where everybody is covered, nobody has to pay any more than they can afford, and that way it's fair. Nobody
So,
feels
so the ultimate
coerced.
coercion. a single
Right, but
a single system with no choices is is the way to go to get more choice. I'm confused. I'm sorry.
well, Blay, can you explain what's wrong with Medicare or Medicaid? People seem to like being covered by government, right? They don't have to worry anymore. Their health needs are met, right?
Well, look, I think this is the game that the socialists play, right? They they come in, they point to, they take a system that's maybe 98% good. They point to the 2% and they say, this is horrible, we got to fix it. They go in, they make something that screws it up, and now it's 90% good, and they blame the people for not, getting with the program and doing things right. And then they screw it up more, and then it's 50% good, and then finally they say, oh, the whole system is crap because of all the selfish people involved. We need to have the government take it over entirely. So this is the game that the socialists play, and I think people have the fact that so many people are complaining, thinking that this guy is Robin Hood, right? He's some kind of hero. I think that shows that people really feel the frustration, and I think they're justified in their frustration. The system is terrible. The system has empowered theft, and the patients are getting milked and paying too much, and maybe not the people on Medicare and Medicaid. The other patients are subsidizing them, but even that, the people who are paying, the people who aren't on those things, who are paying into the system, are paying ridiculous, exorbitant amounts, and they're paying these things. And the doctors are getting screwed. The doctors aren't getting paid anything. They've gone through a decade of or more of medical school and training and all of this, and they've denied themselves, and they're getting the short end of the stick too. So the doctors and the patients who are the furthest politically from the government are the ones getting milked and screwed, and the insurance companies, big powerful centers of money, and the hospitals, also big powerful centers of money, those are the ones who the government is responsive to. So the patients and the doctors are getting milked for the benefit of the insurance companies and the hospitals. And people are feeling that, but they're not seeing the government. It's not the face of
Don't forget
government.
the government. They're getting the money too. So
Mm-hmm.
don't forget
But they're
them.
getting it from the taxes, all right? They're not getting
Yeah, but they're getting it.
it from else. They may get a little kickback, Yeah, they get $1 million for their campaign in return for $100 million worth of legislation. But the people don't see the face of government when they see this. They see the insurance company screwing them. They see the hospital charging, $150,000 that gets marked down by the insurance company to $40,000. That if you went to a private hospital somewhere, you'd pay $5,000 for it. And they're paying $10,000 after all the discounts and whatever. People are frustrated. They're angry. They're angry at the wrong people. The government has empowered this. The government has enabled this, and people are mad. People
I
shouldn't
would
be
say the government
mad.
has incentivized this Because again, when the government
They
controls the
didn't
market,
they more than incentivized it. They're forcing everybody into it.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, United Healthcare probably couldn't survive without screwing the public because of all the rules and regulations and everything they have. But nevertheless, even so, you know, I mean, if you empower somebody, if your neighbor gets empowered to come and take your house away for no reason, you know, are you justified in being violent towards your neighbor? Oh, I don't know, maybe not, but certainly you should be mad at the government. So, you know, if anybody deserves, you know, it's you know, people like Elizabeth Warren who have created this horrible system that is coercive and criminal, frankly. They're the ones that deserve the people's anger
All right, but hold
much
on.
more so than the
But
than
hold
the
on. Isn't
execs
healthcare
who are
a
just
human right?
benefiting from what they've done. So
But
I know that doesn't answer your question about Medicare and Medicaid, but the hell with that.
but
It's correct. These
isn't
companies would never survive in a free market where people could just take their business elsewhere if a company has a long
But
history of
all right, but
denying it.
all of you
they
new
wouldn't operate
libertarians are
that way. But they
missing
wouldn't
out here.
operate that way in the first place.
Yes,
See, that's
if healthcare is a human right. Okay.
yeah, no.
So if
Okay,
healthcare
okay.
is a human right and corporations are greedy and they want profit, wouldn't they just cover the people who it's profitable to cover, and wouldn't they just bone the people who it's unprofitable to cover?
This is where
Don't
I
we
see.
need government to like force them to be fair?
This is where I
Yeah, they
see
would if people
liberty.
waited until they got sick to get insurance. Then yes, they would. But you know, if people, you know, the government again with the government, they've attached insurance, medical insurance, for some reason because of the tax incentives. You know, if you get a medical insurance policy, you don't get to deduct it from your taxes. But if you provide medical insurance for your employees, that does get deducted from their taxes. So the government has created this huge incentive for employees to provide medical insurance to everybody. And that divorces the people. So you don't get a choice of what your medical insurance covers. It's whatever your employer says. That's what it is. And most people aren't going to choose their job. It's hard enough to find a job as it is, let alone pick and choose which job you want based
Well,
on
you
what
get the
kind of medical.
illusion of choice. You get some plans you can pick from at work, but it's not an open choice. It's whatever plans your employer can get and whatever prices they can get, and a lot of
Right. Like
times
if
you
I were to
contribute.
buy medical insurance, I probably would opt out of the abortion coverage. I'm not
Yeah.
going to need it, I don't think. So, you know, but I'm probably forced to pay for that, you know. So, you know, it's ridiculous. You know, all the coverage. If you had private insurance, people would probably get insurance when they were young, like they get life insurance, like you get life insurance maybe for your kids or something like that. You get medical insurance for your kids probably before they were born or after they were born, and you'd keep that policy, or you'd have a, you know, some kind of chain thing going on for you know, for a lifetime. You wouldn't have this thing like, oh, suddenly you got new insurance and this and that. They've completely destroyed any kind of logic or sense in this industry. Of course, you would have medical insurance. There's a need for that. People are willing to pay for it. You know, I mean, it might be expensive because, I mean, chances are a lot of people are going to need hospitalization. It's not like your house burning down. There's like a 1 out of 5,000 chance that your house is going to burn down. So the 4,999 other people subsidize the one in terms of insurance premiums, and that keeps everybody's insurance premiums low. It may not be quite that low because pretty much everybody's going to need medical insurance at some point. But you have catastrophic care. You don't have this thing like when you go to the doctor and then he clips your toenails and it's covered by insurance. Okay, I don't get auto insurance to put gas in my car or oil. Okay, I got auto insurance in case I have a huge accident. I don't go bankrupt, right? So I have like a $1,000 deductible or something like that. And the same thing would apply to medical insurance. You have a big deductible, and it would just be so you don't get wiped out, you know. But sure, you'd still have medical insurance, but it wouldn't cover you the way
And it
insurance.
sounds like without government regulations and meddling, there would be space for much cheaper flat rate care. and direct primary care, things like minute clinics and simple care type businesses, right?
Most people, I think, would just get catastrophic coverage, and then
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Right, exactly.
routine care would be cheap enough that people could pay for it out of pocket. To go back to what Dan was asking earlier about, okay, isn't healthcare a human right? I see a lot of libertarians fumbling this one, and it's always kind of irritated me because learning how to message and how to respond to that is important because this is such a big issue for some people. Um, so we most of the time we will correctly point out that if something requires the labor of another, it can't be considered a human right because the precedent that sets is problematic. You were saying that you inherently have the right to someone else's labor. However, here's the problem though. We don't live in a society with a free market and where the state does not already own our labor. The state already takes approximately 50% of the money we make when all is said and done. So most people are aware of this. They look at other countries where people pay similar amounts in taxes, and they see those people having access to a health insurance or a healthcare system that, sure, their tax money is paying for it, but if they have to go to the hospital, it's free at the point of care. They don't have to worry about getting into a car accident and getting hit with a $50,000 bill and losing everything. So what we need to be doing is educating people on exactly why healthcare has become so expensive and why free market solutions are what are needed over the state monopoly that a lot of people are advocating. So what we have now is basically the worst of both worlds. We have profit-seeking behavior that you see in under market-based economic systems, but we have all the built-in inefficiency and corruption that you'd see in a state-run system. So a lot of people have concluded that, okay, wouldn't it be better if we just had the inefficiency of a state-run system without these exorbitant prices?
But the problem is that wouldn't happen. See, that's the problem. Is the profit incentive doesn't go away. Corporations are in business to make money. That's what they do. They want to make a profit. If they weren't making a profit, they wouldn't be in business. So there's always that incentive for a corporation to make money, or an individual as well.
Why don't we treat healthcare as a utility? I mean, National Grid makes power come to our house every day. Right?
Have you looked at your bill lately? Because there's a lot of little fees and charges in there that all of a sudden have popped up because it's not really again, and it is the worst of both worlds because anybody that lives here downstate, you get into National Grid and you can go into horror stories about that. But keep in mind, insurance is sort of a different case because insurance is always based on shared risk. So the idea is I can't afford a $200,000 medical procedure in an emergency. However, those procedures are relatively rare. So if I get together with 5,000 people, we can bring the price to a reasonable amount to pay a third party to kind of hold the money for us. As it's actually interesting because the science fiction author Robert Heinlein wrote about this as you're paying a bookie. You're paying a bookie to hedge your health. So if you think, man, maybe in the future I might have a big medical bill, it's worth it for you to pay into the system so you're covered.
And it's more than that, because when you have skin in the game and you have to pay more for more comprehensive coverage, in a way, you do the math and you think, gee, wouldn't it make more sense if I just lived a healthier lifestyle or took fewer risks?
That's all what we incentivize.
System, you're incentivized to do whatever you want because the benefits accrue to you. If I want to eat a lot of cookies and cake and stuff, the benefits, the satisfaction accrues to me. And if I need to be on Ozempic the rest of my life, fine, the government will pay for it, i.e. other taxpayers.
Well, except once the state is in charge of your healthcare, then all of a sudden it becomes all too easy for regulators to start saying, well, if we have to pay for your healthcare, now we have the right to start telling you what else
to do. Yeah.
So wait, you're telling me this is a liberty issue?
Well, they'll start saying, okay, your limit. Well, if the current narrative surrounding food is any indication, they'll start saying you are now limited to being able to eat red meat only twice per week. You are limited from being able to buy food with sugar in it. You've you can earn more sugar credits if you do these things that make you a good citizen, but otherwise you're out of sugar credits, or you're out of red meat credits for the week.
This is actually what happens at
And why haven't
hospitals
you
and
reported to your
institutions.
exercise class this morning?
Yeah, exactly.
No, but in institutions that are required to follow federal food guidelines, they're feeding patients food that we now have very good reason to believe is part of the reason they're sick in the first place.
Well, it's the subsidies and the fiat foods, but that's a whole other issue we can get into
Well,
at
that's
a future date.
But it ties into the corruption. So when you have a coerced system that everybody has to participate in, it creates an avenue for lobbyists and special interest groups to pour resources into tweaking things to benefit themselves. And that just makes everything worse. Eventually, I think the whole system would be unsustainable. Don't
Like,
you
you mean
guys
you
agree?
mean like creating drugs that just keep you on them for the rest of your life?
Well,
No.
why cure the problem if you can have somebody come in for an expensive treatment every month, right?
Yeah,
But
it's
we've beat up on this enough. I want to pick on the opposite end of the spectrum. I want to talk about cases where there is a free market in healthcare. So, for example, I had LASIK surgery many years ago. The price of that has actually come down
plummeted.
over the years, and the quality has gone up. The side effects that people were worried about when it first came out, those have largely gone away. I had a wonderful experience and excellent eyesight now, and I was able to afford it. And I am not a wealthy person. Whereas when you look at the actual breakdown of even routine healthcare, what's actually being paid by the health insurance company, 10 times as much as what I spent to have my eyes done. So that wasn't covered by insurance, nor was it as regulated by government. Maybe there's a connection there.
Just a little. Well, that's the thing is that optional surgeries or optional things tend to be more free market. Okay, not always, but in many cases, because the state doesn't get control over them because they're optional. If they took control over them, people would just stop doing it. And now that you have the regular, real free market incentives, what you get is an increase in quality because nobody wants to go to a bad doctor or have a problem with their procedure. And you get a reduction in price because everybody's competing on, hey, how much can I do this for and still make a little on it and get good results? And I got to have them great Yelp reviews because nobody, or whatever review, Doctors Incorporated or whatever the reviewing sites are, because I'm now responsible to all these people who are looking me up online. And amazingly, how the price gets cheap and the doctors get good and it gets done right away. You don't have to wait. It's like all of these things, and all they had to do was just not have the regulations and the government involved in the whole thing.
But wait, that sounds awful. If I'm a doctor, don't I want people to have to see me at my convenience and pay me whatever I want? Why would I want to have to compete and like be good and stuff at my
Yes,
job?
exactly, which is precisely why we should not have a regulatory apparatus, because people will always decide, or unless you have very solid principles, and few people do, people will always decide, okay, you know what? I worked very hard to build this business. Look at those other people offering it cheaper than I am. How do I know that, or how do the patients know that they got the correct training or that they're doing it right? I think the state should get involved and make sure that only people like me, who I happen to think I'm qualified, but I don't think those other people are qualified, the state should pass legislation saying that only people like me should be allowed to compete in this market.
But
There
wait
is
a second, isn't
always
that why we get our cars inspected? Because if they didn't inspect our cars, wouldn't they all just be horrible
Death
accidents
traps.
waiting to happen? Death traps, right? I mean, your car inspection is an important part of your yearly maintenance, isn't it?
To the point
Well, I
where,
wanted to, in the same vein that Bob was saying, I went to I used to go to a lecture series, and they had a guy who ran a private hospital in Houston appear once, and the concept of a private hospital is something like completely foreign to anyone in New York. But apparently in Houston, they have this private hospital. The guy does like a half a dozen types of operations. You look online, you see how much the thing costs, and the guy was saying that that if you were to get one of these operations in a hospital, you know, the hospital might charge $120,000 for the operation. Insurance would knock it down to like maybe $50,000. And then, you know, after you paid your deductible, you'd end up paying like maybe $14,000. But if you just go to him, it's like $8,000 for the same operation. And he was saying, you know, he looked at this, why they have this, you know, what is the incentives? Why are hospitals charging so much? And why are they agreeing to knock it down so much with the insurance companies? And he found out it's a scam involving the hospitals, the insurance companies, and the government together. The insurance companies, when they have a contract with a business, if they can lower their costs, they get incentive payments, is what this guy said. I don't know if it's true, but that's what he said. They get incentive payments. So when the hospital knocks it down from 120 to 50, they just saved, because of their great negotiating power of this insurance company, they've just saved the business $70,000. So they get a $5,000 bonus or something for that. But why would the hospitals go along with this? Well, the hospital, if they knock a procedure down from 120 to 50, they've just lost $70,000. And then they can go to the government and say, hey, we just lost $70,000, and the government pays them the $70,000. So all of this, you know, the taxpayers, the patients, the doctors, everybody's getting milked. The hospitals are making huge amounts of money. And he says, you know, they're very inefficient too. You know, when you go to, they say the doctors, the nurses, everybody loves what he does. They love coming and working in his place because everything's ready, everything's clean. They come in, they get it done, they go out. You go to a regular hospital, people are waiting around for 2 hours. The anesthesiologist didn't show up. You know, this guy's still busy over here. It's not well managed. He says things are filthy. So, you know, that just goes along. If it's private, if you don't have all of these, you know, communistic, socialistic kinds of incentives, where you're removing the payer, you know, destroying the price mechanism by removing the payer from the service, right? You're getting a service, you're not paying for it, your employer's paying for it. Mm-hmm. You know, you're getting the service. When you divorce those two, you end up with higher prices and lower quality. You know,
I can give you a
free market mechanism has to have that price mechanism in order for competition to work and for competition to put pressure to make quality higher and prices lower.
And people need to actually know what the price is. I think the biggest problem with the insurance system is people are so far removed from the prices. Like, and this isn't even the fault of the patients. Like, you can ask a healthcare provider or a hospital how much something is going to cost. Most of the time, you'll be lucky if you ever get a response. The receptionist can't tell you. The doctor can't tell you. You can contact the higher up at the hospital. Maybe in a few weeks, they'll get back to you with an estimate that may be wildly off from what it actually costs. Like, there is. So, yeah.
They don't know.
No idea. Yeah.
They absolutely do not know. They don't know what it is. All they know is, you know, they have this contract that nobody reads, nobody understands, the hospitals, the doctors, and they put in the procedure codes, and then they send it off, and they take whatever they get. Under the contract. They don't know. You can ask them what it is.
Either.
They have no idea how much they're going to get paid. Uh-huh. I mean, I've had this where I've gone in and I said, look, I have insurance, but I don't want the insurance company to know what my medicine is, right? Because I'm worried about room, 101 or whatever in 1984. Okay. So I don't want them to know what's wrong with me, what's wrong with my kids. I don't want them to know anything. Okay. So whatever they're going to pay you, I'll pay you. So just tell me how much you're going to get from them. I'll prove that I have this insurance, if that matters to you. Don't quote me the non-insurance price, which is like 5 times what you accept from insurance. Just tell me what you're going to get, and I'll pay you directly. Win-win, right? I pay you directly. You get your money right away. They don't
can't.
care about them. They don't care about anything. They just
They
want
can't.
to
They're not
go
allowed
through
to legally.
There are
No,
companies
know what
though
it
that
is.
offer that service for you. I mean, Crowd Health, for example, maybe they'll sponsor us. But the
Show
way
me
that
some other business where you can't know how much you're going to pay until after you have the service.
uh,
Oh, I want
Well,
a car. Oh, okay.
wait. I have that. I got that. I
And
got
they
that.
can give you
Or-
the
I got
service
that. The
without your
government. You can't
consent.
find it. You
After
can't
you
read
get
it
the
until
car,
we
then we'll tell
fast
you
it.
how much it.
you can't read it till we've passed it.
Right.
For example, like if you're taken to a hospital, like and you're unconscious or otherwise unable to consent, they'll just do things and then they'll bill you after the fact. Like they can do treatments against you without your consent and
But
bill
isn't that
you.
a problem with the whole pricing mechanism we were just articulating?
But
Like
I
you
don't know
can't
of any
shop
other.
around for a procedure if it's an emergency. They just take you somewhere. Should they just dump you in the alley if it turns out your
It's
your
actually an
insurance
interesting
doesn't cover
question
it?
because even in the absence of all state interference, um, if you have an emergency and you're brought to a hospital and they treat you, should you be on the hook because they technically treated you without your consent? So that's actually a very
Yeah, but then you get into the issue of because again, you were unable to give consent, so should they just let you die in the ER? You know what I mean? Like they're being kind to you by treating you when you're unable to consent is their point of view, and I I can't say I disagree because if I was having a heart attack or something, I'd
from a human
I
point
think
of
the more
view,
complex
they
issue,
should.
though, is when
They
they treat
ought.
you, but not in the way you would have wanted to be
yeah,
treated.
that's a different
So,
story. Yes.
you know, I mean, think about it. A reasonable person having a heart attack would probably want to be treated. But what if you believe that they should have called in the shaman and said the right words over you, and
Right,
you're
like
upset that they,
yeah, there are
you
people
know,
who have like religious beliefs where they don't want to get blood transfusions, but yeah, it is difficult when someone can't give their consent, but letting them die is also, from
Right.
the perspective of most people, immoral.
I mean, but let me.
Somebody brought up crowd health though, because this is basically an attempt to recreate something that used to exist, but like existing outside the bounds of the current regulations. There used to be mutual aid societies that people would pay into. Many of them would offer healthcare benefits. Some even had their own hospitals. What happened was these were regulated out of existence in service to the hospital and insurance cartels. So now people are trying to recreate a similar system, where you pay in and then you get payout if you need it, but they have to find a way to work within the bounds of the regulations that have been put up by the state and their cronies.
Yep, that's the. Let me give this a little bit more of a personal focus, okay? Everybody who thinks that socialized medicine is a great idea, I was in Canada and happened to get a kidney stone,
ooh,
okay? First of all, it was a 2-day nightmare because the first hospital didn't speak English because it was in Quebec, so it was in French Canada. That's fine. But when I went to the second hospital, which did fortunately speak English, they told me that it would take more than 10 days and basically I should go back to the States because I could get it done right away. Now, this is back before the government got as deep into healthcare and basically took over all of the healthcare. And I flew back. I literally left a hospital, got on a plane, flew back to New York, was in the hospital, went from the airport to the hospital, and was treated the next day. Done. Okay? This is the problems when government takes over all of this.
Well, they have so many layers of bureaucracy. So what's going to here's the problem with a state monopoly on healthcare. You get similar outcomes for slightly different reasons. Like in this case, it's because, again, like I said previously, you have the profit-driven behavior and you have certain individuals who will take this as an opportunity to profit and take advantage of their position as being a quasi-monopoly. But then if you have the state running healthcare, you'll have people who are looking to cut costs because any money that they have left over is money that they can put towards other things. So you'll have people denying. So for example, in the system we currently have, you'll have people denying treatment because they can make money from denying your claim. you have a state-run system, you have people denying your claim because, for example, they want to put that money towards something else and they don't want to spend it on this person who, they're old, they have other conditions, they probably are not, it's probably not going to work. So therefore we should save money and not spend it on them.
It gets worse than that, though. Remember the case in England with the kid, with the baby? The parents wanted to take them to the States for treatment.
Oh,
and the government refused. No, we have to let your baby die. Like,
And
excuse me?
It can
Here's
get
the
really
problem.
screwed up when the state has a sole monopoly.
But here's the key. Socialists like to pretend that there are limitless resources for at least certain things if we only will that to be the case. But there's scarcity. There's scarcity in all things, in at least the time it takes to perform the task, right? So even if every human being on the planet became a brain surgeon, and we could do unlimited brain surgeries, there's still only so many brain surgeries that a doctor can do. So there is an upper limit on how many brain surgeries can be done at any given time, right? And since that's an absurd example, think about it. There's never going to be enough supply of healthcare, just generally, that everyone can get everything they want immediately without there being a significant cost somewhere else in society, right?
Right. So under this system, like you have people who are financially well off can afford the treatment. In a system where the state has a sole monopoly, then the concern becomes that, okay, you have to be politically connected to have access to treatment, whereas other people get put on waiting lists for 3 years. So
things are just denied altogether. They're just decided this treatment, cost benefit wise, doesn't
work in it. Yeah.
And that's the criticism everybody leverages against the greedy capitalists, right? Oh, if it's not profitable, they just won't do it.
Again, similar situation, slightly similar outcomes, slightly different situation.
Well, okay. I mean, what is profit? Profit is a measurement of the subjective value that people who are involved in a process give to that particular outcome. So I'm not a millionaire. That's because people don't subjectively value the work I do as highly as they do, say, Oprah, I guess.
To grant you a sole monopoly, though.
Well,
yeah, jack up your prices to 5 times what they're. And that's the issue with healthcare that we have.
I could lobby the government and coerce people to require my services. So sure, there's an option there.
Right.
But it still wouldn't
own a dog, you have a license and you have to do mandatory dog training. And also we limited the number of dog trainers. Right.
Okay.
Sure.
But you bring up a point there, Dan, about unseen, right? Bastiat's unseen.
Yep.
What don't we have because of the system we have too?
Right.
If you have a system where people are paying for their own medical care, sure, there's going to be medical treatment that some people can afford and others can't. But you're also going to develop new medical treatments that don't even exist anymore. And yes, at first, only the ultra wealthy will be able to afford these new medical treatments. But isn't it better that we actually have these new medical treatments that we don't? And eventually, with time, and competition, the treatments will come down in price and they'll be available to more and more people. So if you want this continuous rolling advancement of medical care, then you don't have a system that kills all incentive to create new systems. It's not just a zero-sum game. It's not either I have it or you have it. You develop new things, and there's a constant development of new things, and you want that process. You want a process that fuels that as much as possible, not one that stifles it as much as possible.
Right, and state involvement tends to turn markets into a zero-sum game when otherwise they would not have been. Like you said, for example, a new treatment is developed. Other people figure out how to do the same treatment. They open up their own practices. They start offering it. There's downward pressure on the price.
Like LASIX.
if the state offers them a sole monopoly and also artificially limits the number of practitioners, then
It sounds like that would stifle competition. So even if you're more fairly redistributing a resource, you've also stopped the process of developing new and more efficient.
mhm.
Means of doing it.
Right.
Okay, now we're more than 3/4 of the way through the show. So let's drag this back to, okay, we understand the frustration because we just discussed that for about 30 minutes or 40 minutes. Now, what about what people can and should do about it?
There
That's
are
the question.
situations where
How does that apply to our principles in our platform?
Oh, well, our platform just says we should vote harder, right? And for Democrats, right?
Yeah, no.
suppose you remove the mechanism by which someone can seek recourse because, for example, the state has a monopoly on arbitration, and politically connected megacorporations already pretty much own that system. So if you try to take your health insurance provider to court, they are going to have the backing of the state. They're going to have the resources to drag things out as long as they can until you either run out of money or die, because remember, you're taking them to court because you're sick and they denied your claim. What happens when people are left with little to no other recourse besides violence?
Well, we should just ban guns so they don't have a way to
that's
express that.
See, that's the thing, is that
You make jokes like that, but people who are listening may not understand that that's a joke.
You're right. It's a joke.
Well, we're just discussing Minecraft to remind everybody.
No, the thing is, okay, the frustration is real and with the system, but the fact that you have people who may or may not have mental issues would take up violence as that means shows the problem we have with this entire system. Is that they've perverted the system to the point where people, rightly or wrongly, in this case it's wrongly, clearly, are taking up arms to do something about it. Now, first of all, the means, the method, okay, there are other means that can be used to address it. We still have not heard the full story. We haven't heard exactly why this happened. I've heard rumors, I've heard other stuff.
I did read his manifesto. He gives a very sad story about family issues. And
he had failed back surgery. Yeah.
I mean, but at the same time, it's again, is that justified to use that level of violence against another person who may or may not have direct responsibility for any of this? And what happens if that becomes a regular thing?
Well, the only argument in favor of that is that it creates maybe a little more awareness on the part of the people who actually have power that they will be accountable.
It adds the consequences that we currently lack because there is no competition. They will not be
in a good way. Not in a good way.
But
eventually it turns into the French Revolution.
Yeah, exactly.
People cannot go to another provider. There is no market competition. So this is the one option people have to send a message. Yeah. And this is what puts pressure on. This is what puts pressure on other corporations. Like,
yeah, but it's not
for example, it's not a coincidence that Excellus Blue Cross already rolled back some ridiculous limit they were going to set on anesthesia for surgery on the
but that's an immediate reaction, and you know what? The state doesn't care because again, the problem is the state has a lot of the responsibility here. But the state is never accountable because nobody realizes, because again, it's a little shell game, okay? Because the state creates the regulation, then they create recording requirements, then they create all of this paperwork, okay, that the insurance companies and the insured and the physicians all have to deal with. And it incentivizes all of these broken systems, like the hospitals having to overcharge and do all these things. But the state can simply say, no, we're there for the children. It's
But
always
Bob, you're making this sound so
The
complicated. How
the
could any
state is
individual person
the
fight back?
state is the ultimate aggressor, but somebody who comes in, takes advantage of the state's regulatory apparatus, knowing that he'll be protected by the state, and then uses that position to, for example, carry out a bunch of contractual violations by implementing an AI that will automatically deny claims for care that should have been covered under the contract that people signed. Is that person not an aggressor? Like, this guy was on his way into a shareholders meeting to brag about the fact that he'd increased the number of claim denials from the industry average, which is around 15%, to over 30%.
very
That's
careful
that's 1 in 3 claims. This guy was there
Again,
to brag about
we don't
denying
advocate
people life-saving
initiating violence against anyone. Okay,
but he initiated violence when he denied people's contractual claims. That is when someone gives you their money.
That explains the frustration. But
no,
the
when
problem,
someone
the
gives you
problem
their money,
becomes
you are robbing them.
this
That
becomes
is theft of money, which translates to theft
If
of labor.
somebody kidnaps your kid and says, "Go rob a bank, or we're going to kill your kid," and you rob a bank, are you initiating force against the bank?
Technically,
that's what's
yes.
happening.
Yeah, you are.
This
If you're a
company,
soldier,
But the bank
not,
is in a
this company
separate
cannot
part.
exist without initiating force against people. They're in a bad position. Maybe they should, ethically just go out of business. Okay, but that's their choice. The government has forced them to a position where they either have to use force, use improper means to collect money from people, or go out of business. So, really, the government is the bad actor here.
Okay,
and that's
this guy was not a victim of the state, though. Okay, he was using his position as a crony capitalist to make as much.
We're all victims of the state.
Rose, hold on a second. This is important. This is very important here. What we are seeing is the undeniable trajectory of how this whole situation plays out unless we implement libertarian ideas.
Right.
Because if
yes,
we
Karyn
allow...
Thompson would not have been in a position to make money if there were a free market and people could have taken their business elsewhere. Yeah.
No, he would have been in a position to make money. He would have been in a position to help more
to make
people.
money legally and morally.
Right. We absolutely need this reform because if we don't, society tears itself apart by people who feel desperate and who resort to violence as a result of it. And whether you can sympathize with it or whether you believe that, violence is wrong under any circumstances and you're a complete pacifist, I think we can all agree that the trajectory we're on is a spiral downwards until society collapses. And the government's attempt to solve the problem by just giving more money to make healthcare seem more affordable to individual people is unsustainable and causes secondary and unseen effects like we were talking about before.
And look at the message that socialism sends to people. You are poor, you are suffering because of greedy bastards out there in society. So the message of socialism, if some guy mugs you in the last car of a subway train, why should anybody be mad at that guy? Morally, you have the money, he doesn't. The government takes your money and gives it to him. He's just eliminating the middleman. He's doing you a favor. It's cheaper if you let people just go around mugging people. That's the message of socialism. That the people who have stuff are evil, and the people who don't have it are good, and it's okay to steal. It's okay to take things away from people, and that message of violence is why so many people feel they're justified in attacking this guy because they think he's greedy, he's stealing from me, and
but
so
a contractual violation is theft of money, and which means it's theft of labor. It is a NAP violation. Okay, and no, the socialists are not saying that that we should hate someone just because they have things. That's a straw man.
That's absolutely not true. That is exactly what they say. They say it out loud, and they say it repeatedly, and they say that violence is justified, and it's not. Okay,
we can go into that at some other point, but that's not the actual message they're sending. But I mean, I'm not a socialist, but I actually have read their ideology, so I can understand where they're coming from. That's not the argument they're making.
I think they give different messages to the populists versus the educated elite. Eat the rich is something
no one hated Karyn Thompson because he was successful. They hated him because he was exploiting a system that he could use to aggress against people by denying them by carrying out contractual violations and denying them the product that they had been paying for.
Yeah, well, we all agree that needs to stop.
It's not, but what makes it particularly evil in this case is that when you, for example, when someone has been paying into your system, then you turn around and say, you know what, I don't feel like fulfilling my end of the contract. What are you going to do? Take me to court? I already own the court because the state has a monopoly on it.
What if
all your legislators?
Let's be theoretical here and say he was trying to cut healthcare costs for everyone that he worked for at that corporation. Like, you know what I mean? Is that, see, the problem is it's all about incentives. If you incentivize somebody to do something bad, most people will do that bad thing. If it's in their interest, they will do it.
And they'll rationalize it. They may even say, look, I am obligated by law with fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. I would be in violation of my contract, as the CEO, if I didn't do the things that maximized return.
Yes. This guy had an incentive to deny as many claims as possible, because that is what has happened with the system we have, with the state getting involved in creating an environment where people are incentivized to violate contracts and maximize profits.
Right.
The state may be the ultimate aggressor, but that does not mean that the people playing the game are innocent. The system attracts.
That's not the point.
Why don't people just leave then?
Okay.
Why don't people just leave?
The idea that we should hate the player is sometimes both are the enemy.
If the guy is denying claims, why don't people just say, well, what the hell? I'll just take my business elsewhere. I'm going to go get a different insurance company.
In a free market, that's what happened.
That's why they have to use his insurance, and it's a monopoly. It's like a lot of mini monopolies, like the cable companies. You only get one. You get your insurance company based on your employer for the most part, and there's no choice anyway, because the government regulates the stuff so much that all the insurance companies are pretty much the same anyway. So they're all doing exactly the same thing. The free market, there's no free market in healthcare. And so there's nothing to hold this guy accountable except government. And government's their good buddy.
And if you are the government, you want people fighting over whether Brian Thompson was a villain or whether Luigi Mangione was the villain, because as long as people are fighting about emotional stuff, they're not looking at what they can do personally to get out of the system and into parallel structures like crowd health, or what they can do, with their elected leaders. If you want to go down and talk to your Congress critter, okay, fine, for whatever good that'll do. This is
what happens when government takes over something. You always end up with violence because they take away people's rights. They do things that are not fair. They break contracts with people because they can, because the state has the monopoly on violence. And then when people rebel and they get angry, the state throws up their hands and goes, we don't know what happened. Oh, they know what happened. They know exactly what happened. They just don't care.
We should definitely repeal that Article 1, Section 8. Was it Article 1? That clause in the Constitution that allows the government to be involved in healthcare. We should definitely repeal that.
Absolutely. It's the government should not be involved in any commercial enterprise at all. Why is the government
involved? My point was there is no power, there is constitutional power for the government to get involved in healthcare. It's completely, why, it's the whole involvement in healthcare at all is completely unconstitutional, unlibertarian. That's how it fits into our platform. The
Right.
government has no business doing any of this stuff. And the government has screwed this all up. But of course, the government's got all the microphones, so they blame everyone else for the problems that they've created. And they're even the people who created this problem, the Elizabeth Warrens who created this problem, are actually out there screaming at how this guy deserved what he got. Are you kidding me?
Sometimes both things can be true, though. Sometimes the government, I think we all agree here, is the ultimate aggressor. However, again, at what point is someone who takes advantage of the systems put in place by the
Rose,
government?
it's like the bank
Also,
robbery
All right,
analogy.
the local mob
also
guy
an aggressor?
tells your neighbor, mob guy tells your neighbor, go ahead and steal Rose's TV. It's not a problem. She can't, we're not going to let her do anything about it. Go ahead, go steal her TV. Who do you blame more, the mob guy or your neighbor who goes in and steals your TV?
I do blame the mob guy who was told he's allowed to steal my TV because he's still choosing to do it. He is still an aggressor. They are both my enemy.
The thing is,
Rose deserves it. Rose deserves. She's rich. She's been stealing from you for years. The reason you're poor is because she's got this beautiful TV. That's why you're poor. Go
So
grab
you're
her.
saying if the guy is duped into it,
This guy
he's less
who was
culpable.
but
millions of dollars
this is the thing: is the government
or by the state.
basically forces people to act evil. Like it's not just like he didn't just wake up someday and say, I'm going to be evil and run a huge healthcare company and screw people over. Okay. Nobody thinks of themselves like that. Nobody's evil in their own mind. Okay. But because of the regulations, because of the way the state runs the system and forces people to operate in a specific manner, they make people act in evil ways. And what ends up happening is violence, whether they like it or not, whether, this was a horrible thing and it was a horrible thing that was done. It's an inevitable consequence of pushing the system that far and forcing socialism on people, because after a while they get angry.
I think what Rose is getting at is the importance of acknowledging the validity of the
Again,
feelings
is the
that people
CEO of
have that they're
Raytheon
being...
a poor victim of the state, or are they someone who's looking to make money off of the war machine?
Let's say the CEO would have walked into that meeting and gotten fired.
That wasn't going to happen, though.
Go theoretical for a second. Let's say he walked in and said, you know what? You're not doing a good job. You're not representing the people. You're out of here. What would happen with the next person? The exact same thing. Because they're incentivized and forced to do so by the system and the government.
Force can counter incentives. This is the motive behind terrorism and guerrilla leaders. They use violence, bombs and kidnapping and extortion and things like that, to try and disincentivize certain behaviors. So the argument goes that if the CEOs knew that their physical safety or their family's safety could be reasonably threatened, maybe they would act differently. Maybe they would.
But is that a good outcome?
The question is, what
I agree, and that's what I'm saying. Society just falls apart when we go down that road.
There is a certain type of person who is seeking out this job. Okay, most normal people would not be able to sleep at night knowing that they had just denied somebody's claim for cancer treatment.
Okay, Rose, there's going to be psychopaths or sociopaths, whatever the correct term is, in any society, even the libertarian utopia.
When you have
if we arrange the incentives
in a hierarchical system, they rise to the top. But that's
I'm pretty sure people like that would make good CEOs under any system. But the point is,
our system, it would be possible for people to steal legally. You couldn't do it. The only way you could get money in our system would be by providing somebody something that makes it worth their while to give you money. You have to give them something they perceive to be substantially greater than the money that they're giving you. Otherwise, they're not going to give it to you.
Right.
In a libertarian system, there would be the incentive to provide good insurance, good health care at the cheapest price. Why? Because if you didn't, the guy down the street would immediately take off and do that, and you would lose all your subscribers. They would all go elsewhere because you weren't giving them a good deal. The problem is that the system incentivizes giving people a horrible deal that they can't get out of. It's like a rigged poker game. You're there for the duration. You don't have a choice, and you can't escape.
And
So
that's what
what
makes the violence
I think
that
Rose
brings
has
up
a
the
point,
I
though. I
violence.
mean,
think
these
I
people
think we
are
all
going to government and
all agree.
asking for these rules, and they're getting these rules, you know. But again, this is the government's fault because they're telling everybody, you don't like what's going on, come to us, complain, spend your whole freaking life in our chambers, you know, praying to us for relief,
Mommy and daddy. Yeah,
you
mommy and
know.
daddy syndrome.
So the solution
I
then
think
has to be something that individuals can do to get themselves out of that system and to basically steal the the air from the fire,
yes.
right? I mean, if you look at crowd health, for example, it's people opting out of traditional health insurance. And last time I checked, you could even fund 80% of your account with something like Bitcoin, right? So the government's control over money, whether it's from taxes or money printing, is what gives them the actual, rubber meets the road power over corporations. That plus the monopoly on violence, right? But how long would the monopoly on violence last if there was true separation of money and state? So that's a topic for a different podcast, but I think that's how people fight back.
I
Yes.
think we can all agree that the state is the reason why the system exists. But what I was getting at there is, at what point can you consider someone who is participating in that system to also be an aggressor? Okay, I think we can all agree here that war profiteers are also aggressors. But somehow, when we're talking about the healthcare system, which is about as regulated as the weapons manufacturing system and about as much of a creation of the state as the war profiteering system, somehow people have this resistance to saying that people who take jobs as health insurance companies.
Nobody
Rose, your
here is
point is
saying this
well
person was an
taken.
angel. Okay,
We
that's not the
live
point.
in a
But
society that is not as free as it pretends to
but
be. And there
he's
is certain types of
but
speech that gets
Yeah.
podcasts like this kicked off of the
oh,
platforms,
we don't advocate violence here. We're talking about whether it's an inevitable outcome of the system
which
and
we all
whether
agreed that
somebody
it is.
It
can
is
be
because
considered to be an aggressor. I
Right,
would
and we
argue that somebody who
condemn
takes a
that
job
violence.
in such an industry can be argued to have to be an aggressor.
Of course it can. You have articulated that very well. I think we all agree. But again, the solution to this is going to be something different than playing into the system that the government wants. They don't want us thinking outside the box. They want us arguing, back and forth over who's the victim and who's the
yeah,
criminal and who's justified and who's wrong. And as long as there are good guys and bad guys fighting each other and government is in the middle, both sides will appeal to government and say, hey, impose our solution, punish who we feel the bad guy is. And that just gives government more and more power. Since we all acknowledge that government is ultimately the problem, that's the one thing that we can't do. So, on that note, I think we can maybe summarize things by saying that we have to get government completely out of healthcare and other things. Does anyone have anything to add to that conclusion or any concrete steps that individuals, especially in our state of New York, could take to further that end?
go with a private solution. Go with something that's not tied to to this big government. The problem is, of course, states like New York make it extremely difficult. But that's the main option. It's also part of the reason New York doesn't want to believe it. But this is why people are leaving, because that's the one way people vote with their feet, and that's the truth. And they will see that even more. The more regulations they clamp down, the more things they do, the more people will go elsewhere, looking for more freedom, more liberty, less government.
Well, I also think people should stick to what they're good at. The government is good at violence. That's what it is. It's institutionalized violence. How you expect jug, jack-booted thugs to do anything for your health care is beyond me. So these people should stick to what they're good at, mass killing, and stay out of anything else.
What about finding direct care or primary care doctors? Maybe
That is a growing industry, thankfully. Unfortunately, they still have to operate within the bounds of things like certificate of need laws. So it's not as cheap and available as it should be, but it is a start. Like this is a growing practice. Doctors who just decided we don't want to we don't want to deal with insurance companies at all. So people pay a monthly subscription fee and they have reasonable prices. Like that is
The
growing.
problem is, like in states like New York, it is illegal for them not to take Medicare and Medicaid. You have to take it. They will not let you be a doctor if you don't.
There are price minimums. Like other area hospitals will sue you if you're not charging enough. You're not allowed to undercut them.
Is anybody sounding insane to anybody else? It's too cheap, damn it!
Evil system.
And also, like medical universities have a monopoly on the ability to certify new doctors, and they artificially limit the number of doctors that can ever exist.
So in this unfree state, maybe the best thing that we can do is to try and take care of our own health as best as we can, to try and avoid being sucked into the black hole of the system, if at all possible.
Build parallel structures. Eventually,
parallel economy is really, that's the true statement there.
I think we will see an increase in quote-unquote back alley doctors emerging who, may or may not be allowed to practice, but will offer basic procedures and treatments to people who otherwise can't afford to interface with the system.
Well, the problem is
in the practice. All the hospitals are usurped.
Yeah, you need a license in this state to be a florist. So think about how crazy that is. To arrange flowers, you need a license and a training class.
You need a license to take someone else's dog for a walk in exchange for monetary compensation.
Yeah, this is all,
Well, I mean, the fact is, and we're probably going to come at this from many different angles as we continue these podcasts in the future, but ultimately the process, whatever it is to freedom, starts with people seeing the world for what it really is and opening their eyes to the reality that we've been talking about. So if nothing else, I hope this conversation has been somewhat illuminating to other people trapped in the system just like us. And if people want to learn more about ways they can get involved and maybe continue the process of illumination, I would encourage them to email us or go to our website. It's lpny.org. And the best email to reach us at, Bob, what is that currently?
Believe it is. Hold on one second. .org.
We're so new at this podcast thing. Maybe if we can do show notes later, we can also include some links.
You can find us on Facebook and Discord, I'm sure.
I mean, you could just go to lpny.org because there's links that say contact us, and it will bring you to a form where you can get more information. So,
yep, absolutely. All right, guys, this has been a very challenging conversation, but an interesting one. I look forward to speaking with you guys on the next Liberty Test.
I had a feeling it would be.
Where will you be when the order is given to censor your mind as free speech is forbidden, as martyrs for peace from the world will be driven away by the sound of a bellowing thunder and choke on the blood of a dream going under? Tear up our Constitution, and from every direction we cry revolution, standing together and without permission, soldiers for truth in the war of attrition, the love of our country as our ammunition. I'm a long, long way from my home, and I'm going to change all the things I find strange, for I am not one man alone. Yes, I